Hi, this is Patrick Kilby with Rio Products. Welcome to Rio's Tying the Fly. For this session, we're tying the Chubby Chernobyl. It's one of my all-time favorite trout dry flies. And for this, we're going to start with a size 12, 3X long nymph hook. We like this nymph hook for the proper length, but also the heavy wire helps ensure we're going to land fish in heavy cover, heavy water, and of course big fish. Before we add thread to this, we should gauge the size of the foam that is going to go on it. And the fastest way I know to do that is to use the hook gape. So from the hook point up to the shank, this distance, if you can get your foam that width, that's always going to be consistent no matter what hook size you use. And what I like to do is just take a strip of foam and push it up against the bottom of the shank and then push in to the hook point just to make a mark there. Then I can take that mark and I know if I start there and trim it. So now we have a strip of foam that's the proper width for this hook size. Next, for the back of the foam, we want to dog ear it, which means just knocking the corners off of the foam. And it's easy to do too much, so just start with a tiny bit, and that's the right amount. Otherwise, it ends up too pointed. So this just gives it a little bit more of that buggy shape that we're looking for. And we're going to trim the front of the foam at the end. All right, let's jump into tying this. So one quick trick is to start your thread at the 3/4 mark, meaning if this is the middle of our shank, and then we split this top half in the middle again, there's our 3/4 mark. So we want to start our thread right about there. And you'll see why in a second. So take a few turns back over itself, then one twist around and a couple securing wraps, and then you can trim off your excess. Then just work your thread back to even with the hook point. So now our thread is even there. We're going to select our purple crystal flash, about 5 strands. We are going to bend this around our thread and then sliding that down to your hook shank and trapping it on top of the shank. Keeping it in a nice tight bundle and wind back to a point where your thread is now even with the barb of the hook. Okay, so that tail is very secure in there now. And because we started our thread at the 3/4 mark, we now have a place to quickly measure our tail length. So just bending this tail, the flash up to that point and trimming it off, then we now have a tail that's 3/4 of a shank length. All right, so now we start to color the body. We're going to do that with our purple ice dub. You can really use any dubbing you'd like. For this, I love ice dubbing. It's got great reflective qualities, tons of colors. And to dub this, as you saw, I'm twisting with my thumb and my forefinger to get this nice tight band of material on my thread. It can slide up and down, so I can position it right up against my hook shank. So my first turn, I'm ready to start applying that color to the shank. So I will begin wrapping this in a spiraling motion forward, applying that color to the shank of the hook, bringing it all the way up to just behind the eye. As you get better at these, you can learn to put enough dubbing on to go all the way up and back. But as you're learning control, it's best to just try to do it in small bits. less is more. You want to just keep it tight. And then we're going to wrap back to our starting point and then right back up to even with the point of the hook again. So this is partly where this fly starts to get its name, because the traditional Chernobyl ants and Chernobyl hoppers did not use dubbing as the body on it. And because this one just had a lot more color options and the wing and such, it had a new name. If you want to read more about this fly, a little history on the fly, the Rio website, there's a blog story about this fly that you might find interesting. So now that we've got our color base on here, we want to add in our foam deck. We don't want this to roll off as we tie it, and we don't want to cut through the foam by applying too much pressure. So it takes a little bit of practice. First of all, the distance. You don't want this extending all the way out to your tail, flash length. You want it to go halfway. So get it situated where you want it, right about there. And then I pinch my fingers on the foam and the hook and the vise. Everything is secure in this hand right now. Now I can come up and just basically take a loose wrap over this. That allows me to see that I'm straight across. I'm not, angled off to one side. My fingers prevent it from angling the other way. So I've got a nice loose wrap on there. And then as I lift up and bring it around again, I'm now tightening this up. I'm applying pressure with this finger because I'm holding it in place and not allowing it to twist off the other side. And I'm pulling just enough to where it's very secure, but it's not cinching in and cutting the foam. Okay? And again, it's foam, it's practice, so if you do cut it, you know how far you went. Don't go that far next time. Okay, so we've got a couple securing wraps on there. We'll put a couple, three more on there. And now our foam is pretty solid. To make this even more secure, had you put a dot of super glue, a drop of super glue on top of the tie-in point and then tie your foam in, then it really locks it in and gives your fly more durability. And it really prevents it from twisting. So I would encourage you to do that if you want it really secure. All right, next up is our Antron wing. So we want a section of this material. This is McFlylon Antron. We want a piece that's going to be long enough when it's doubled to extend at least to the end of the tail there. So this is plenty long enough. We can trim off any excess. So I'm going to lay that on top. A couple of wraps right in the same groove where we tied in our foam. Now we want this to come forward, but if you just start wrapping, it slides behind it and it doesn't secure it. So to do that, we just want to kind of create a bubble of that material behind. Couple of gentle wraps. We're not pulling down hard because we want this to be loose enough where we can slide that foam or that Antron forward, and it just creates that little trapped bubble of material behind it. Now, as we tighten that up, it really helps secure this wing in place so it can't come out. With that in place, we get to start adding our rubber legs. These are square silicone legs, and why I like square is because of the way they move in the water. If you think about the square shape in the water, it's more of a back and forth, like a paddle, something swimming back and forth. Round rubber legs can just go all over and do all kinds of different motions. Square legs only move back and forth, and I think that's a key feature to really look like the insect is swimming. So if your vise will rotate, if not, you can just hold it on the back side and tie it in. You want it to be secured right in this groove of the foam, not up on the wing and not on the body, but right in that groove of the foam. And we want this V shape of the legs. Then we're going to repeat that process here on the near side. So you can do a few light wraps and then position the legs as needed. Once you are happy with them, you can tighten that up. Now, to finish the look of it, we take a little bit more dubbing. It doesn't take very much. And just a little bit more twist on there. And what this is going to do is it's going to cover up the base of our wing and help keep these legs separated on the fly. Okay, now we're ready to move forward and just repeat it again. It's almost like tying two flies on the same hook. So we're going to just put a little more dubbing on again and bring this forward to the, just behind the eye of the hook. We do that, we could do it with our thread, but then you can see your thread and we just want a nice, clean, colorful body in there. Okay, so you're gonna just give this a slight tug just to keep it nice and straight. You'll pinch right behind it and then repeat what we did on the back. So we can cinch down as you're kind of pulling up and back towards yourself here. And once it's in position, we've got it nice and secure on there. We can now add in our front wing. So for this, we want a longer piece of Antron. Reason is because we want this to reach all the way to the back of the fly also. So give yourself a piece that's plenty long enough and repeat the steps. So bear in mind not to trap your legs from the back. So securing that one, bending this back, creating that little bubble, some light wraps over it, and just slide it back in to minimize that. And then 2 or 3 wraps to lock it down. We want to repeat the steps with our legs. So a couple of light turns, position it how we want it. Then you can tighten up. As you tighten it up, you can see those legs close in. If they're too loose, they'll stay wide open. We want something in between that. Yep, so what I did there is I trapped this leg by pulling it back. So we're going to do that again. Make sure we don't trap a leg out of the position we want it. So it should look like 2 X's if you're looking at it from above. Then a little bit more dubbing just to finish this thing off. Separate those legs and tidy it up. Now, to finish it off, simply lift all of it up out of the way, bring your thread under to the front, just behind the eye, and now we can whip finish it. I like 5 turns of thread, and if it's not going to be too much bulk, I'll do 5 more, just to give myself some added insurance. then you can trim that off. I always encourage anyone to apply head cement or any kind of securing agent there to just make the fly nice and secure. But trout flies get beat up, and that's the end goal, is to catch fish and have them get beat up. All right, let's clean it up. So first, let's trim this head. So while we have this lifted up, just think of this eye as a very small length and then triple it. So another eye and another eye, and about there is where you want to trim this off. If it's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, it's not a big deal, but that little skating lip on it really helps this fly to fish well, and it gives, again, that nice profile of stoneflies and hoppers. So take care to trim those corners off like we did on the back. So we want to dog ear these corners, pulling the legs out of your way so you don't accidentally trim those. And again, less is more. You don't want to over trim that, otherwise you end up with this little pointed head and it doesn't look as nice. All right, so now let's trim up these legs. Remember, from the barb up to the eye, that was our shank length. That's how long each leg should be. So you can use anything you need to measure it. You can eyeball it. I usually just take my scissors and just take a quick gauge, and I'm like, okay, it's right about there. And then I can come up here. You don't want to stretch this out, because if you stretch it out and cut it, it springs back and it's the wrong length. So leaving it in this natural condition, gauging with your measuring device where you want to trim it, and then make your cut. Then you can use the others, or use that first cut as your gauge for the others, and then repeat on the other side. So I want it right about there. And then I can just take these others and just cut across and keep them all about the same length. So they should all be shank length. They can be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. It's not going to hurt the fly, but they give a nice keel and nice motion in the water. Last is our wing. So we want this front wing to be the same length as the back wing, and they're all going to come back even with the flash. So if you just pinch all of this together and slide it back and give it a trim at the end of your flash, now you have the wings at the proper length. Speaking of these wings, to me, this is one of the most important features of this fly. It gives the impression of a fluttering insect that's trapped on the water surface, particularly stoneflies, grasshoppers, in smaller sizes, maybe caddis or whatever. It's a trigger point for these fish. And so when I do fish it, I utilize this wing to the fullest. I like it to be very large, so I use a comb or a dog brush, works really well. You can give it a quick brush, and then as I put floatant on this, I'll stroke all the fibers forward to really make it full and enhanced. That's the way I like to fish it. And then little things about it, little twitches at the right moment. So if it's just coming through a zone where you think a fish should be, or you know a fish is, the smallest twitch just to make these legs kick, and it's almost too much for the fish to resist. They love it. So I really encourage you to tie this in lots of different colors and sizes. Check out the Rio site. There's all kinds of color variations that you can explore and try. It's just a wonderful fly to have in your box. It catches fish everywhere. The Chubby Chernobyl. So thank you for joining me. I hope you learned a few things, and I look forward to sharing more with you. Thank you.